Today we have Masami Sato from B1G1, who I'm thrilled to have on the show because she has an incredible business and actually coming up to a very special anniversary for them just this month. So welcome, Masami.
Thank you so much for having me, Rafael.
It's my pleasure. So B1G1 stands for Buy One, Give One. And I came across actually your company quite a long time ago now when I connected with a good friend. And they said when I linked in with them that it was going to create an impact. They were going to plant a tree, or they were going to give something. I can't recall because it's several years ago. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. How are they, measuring all these new LinkedIn connections, and how is this leading to positive impact? And behind that was actually B1G1. So a very simple idea, but extremely powerful one. Please tell us a bit about how this was first came into being and your journey to impact.
Yeah, and it's great to be here anyway, because I think, we all have so many experiences, and I'm so glad that your experience included this B1G1 moment, when you realized that by creating a simple connection on LinkedIn, something great happened in the world. So B1G1 exists to do this. We imagine a world where every business action can turn into positive social impact. And that was in 2007. So this coming month, we are celebrating our 15th anniversary. We've been doing this for a long time. So for people who are listening, I just want you to imagine, imagine to understand the B1G1. So imagine if every time you enjoyed a cup of coffee or tea, somebody receives access to life-saving water. Or imagine if every time you read a book and learned something great, a tree gets planted. And imagine if every business could actually make the impact that they want to make. And then if we did if all of the businesses did it together, what kind of world can we create? That's the B1G1 mission to create a world full of giving by working with businesses and helping them to integrate effective giving in their day-to-day action. And they do that through our online digital platform that kind of smartly link and track the giving impact. And then we have also the causes that we work with, that we carefully select and bring into B1G1, and then come up with a tangible impact unit so that business giving becomes like very measurable and trackable. So that's B1G1. Rafael, your question was also like, how did we come to this initiative, right? Like founding of this initiative. Let me just give you a very quick version of, or hopefully very quick version of the journey into the founding of B1G1. So I'm actually Japanese and I live in Singapore now. B1G1 is a social enterprise in Singapore, but global initiative. So I was born in Japan, and then as a young child, I was very quiet and shy, and I didn't know how to express myself. Like I was quite afraid of talking to strangers, and so that was me. But when I graduated from school and about to go into the real world, I actually paused and thought, I wanted to learn about what was happening in the world. So I decided to leave Japan, and then I became this global backpacker as a young Japanese woman. So it was amazing, most fascinating time in my life, because when I couldn't speak English, means I couldn't speak the language in the countries I was visiting. Finally, I started to really enjoy connecting with people in a real way. So that time I started to see that, actually the world wasn't such a scary place. We all looked and, different, and we came from different background, but actually we were quite similar in so many ways. Yeah, so that was my discovery, and I started to really love and connecting with people. At the same time, I saw so many issues like children not being able to go to school, or disabled people fending for themselves. So I really reflected on that. And then years later, when I became a mom, and at that time I was living in New Zealand, when I felt this like extraordinary sense of love and connection with this little thing in my arm, I thought, I couldn't just keep saying to myself, I was too small to do something. Then I decided to start a business and became an entrepreneur. And with that company that I had at that time, which happened to be a food business because I was passionate about food, because the food connected people together. And that's how I traveled around and connected with people, through food, enjoying food together. For me, going into food business was a natural choice. And then eventually, with all the struggle and difficulty of being an entrepreneur, my business started to develop and grow. And then I had two, businesses in New Zealand, sold them and moved to Australia. And then I developed that into a packaged frozen meal company. Eventually, that business was distributing packaged frozen meals to over 150 retail stores around Australia. We got to the point, I paused and then thought about this because I realized that we still weren't doing anything tangible, to make a difference, even though I started my company to make a difference and to intending to give all the profits away to help street children who didn't have the same kind of privilege as my children. But then we were too busy. We didn't have a lot of money to give. We were putting all the money back into business to keep growing. And we also didn't know how to do anything. We didn't have a time. So I thought oh my gosh, if I kept going like this, and then maybe in 10 or 20 years time, I would still be doing the same thing, telling myself the same story. And, I'm not ready yet. We are not ready yet. So then this simple idea came to me. And then I thought, what if, instead of doing big thing in the future, what if we did something small and did it every day? And at that time, B1G1's idea was born. Then we decided that for every meal we sold, we would contribute a small portion of our proceed to fund the distribution of free meals to children through an experienced NGO. So that was what we did. And about 7 months later, when I was working, still in the kitchen or something, another thought came to me, which was that I actually knew so many other amazing entrepreneurs and business people along my entrepreneurship journey. And I knew that they cared about lots of things and many other things. So I thought, what if all the businesses came together and all of us practiced this power of small giving, which is every time we do business, something great happens in the world. And that was the time I decided to sell my company and then moved to Singapore and then started B1G1 from there. So that's the story.
Wow, it's an amazing journey, and I mean, hats off to you to become a mother and then become an entrepreneur on the back of that, serial entrepreneur, in fact, and that's an incredible amount to undertake. I think any founders listening to the show could sympathise with just how hard it is to start one business from scratch, let alone several. And good for you in terms of your commitment to that kind of realization moment where you go, I think this is a trap we all kind of fall into, which is we all think this is our big goal, we want to get to this place. When I've got X amount of revenue or X amount of profit, that this is what I'm going to do, because ultimately this is why I'm motivated to build this thing. But you like you say, there's always another hurdle, there's always another challenge, and sometimes we set ourselves goals that are just a bit ambitious, I guess, initially. And the genius part of your concept is really that you're giving the whole way. You kind of bake in giving, you automate giving, you make it simple for any business. And I'd love you to just sort of share the diversity of some of the different types of companies you've got, because it can be anything, right? It could be literally anything. It's not necessarily coffees and in coffee shops. It's accountants, it's retail. It's really interesting. So can you describe a couple of the impacts that can come from various sort of different industries, the partners, the members that are working with you, just to give people a few more ideas?
Sometimes we get misunderstood that, that's like Tom's shoes. And because Tom's, their, giving was very famous, like every pair of shoes they gave a pair. And it was very straight, like a clear cut story, and it was easy to remember. But the B1G1 is actually very different, because it's never about the businesses giving what they are selling.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to have an hour accounting.
Well, they might do, but But the thing is, what's most needed in the world, right? Like what actually changes things on the ground in the communities around the world. And that's the part that we need to help, like we need to fund. So the businesses, when they create their, so-called giving stories, we also encourage them to not to get just fixed with the product and services that they are selling, because that could be one way of giving, and that's great. Like we have a coffee shop giving access to water too, and that's great because it gives people that clear idea. But we also have a swimming school. For every lesson they provide to children, they also give access to water or education. Or we also have a lot of companies, B2B businesses like coaches or lawyers or counselors, or giving access to education, or even for every Zoom call they decided to educate a child or plant a tree. Or actually we don't limit what the giving stories should be, and then let the companies decide what they want to do. So we have a lot of like health-based businesses too, like chiropractor, dentist, or we also have, retail business, fashion brand, online stores, or digital companies, consultant, marketers, PR company, employment company, even construction company. So we have we cover so many industries. So today we have nearly 3,000 businesses working with us in over, I think, 48 countries.
Wow.
And the industries too. If we look at the industry list, we have a business in almost every industry that exists. So we really don't limit what this initiative is for, like which industry vertical this initiative is for. So that probably made our expansion and growth probably trickier than having just one focus. And this is just for restaurant. Right? Then we want the restaurant to just give a meal for every meal they sell. Then our value proposition would have been much clearer, and then easier to get into the specific marketplace. But we also believe that this initiative is created for every business of all sizes and then all types.
Wow. And I mean, you are truly global in that sense. I mean, if your mission is to create a world full of giving, then you're going to need to connect to these different partners across the world who are doing amazing work. And also your members are very much global. I mean, I looked at your reports and I saw that you've got the majority actually of your members and partners seem to come from Oceania, like Australia, New Zealand, and Europe and North America, more so than Asia. And I wondered if that how come? Because you're obviously based in Singapore. Is it a mentality behind those businesses? Is it just the kind of relationships that you initially started? Why do you think there's more from those regions than say Asia, where you were grown?
Yeah, I think what you just said when you were asking question explains that partly. So first of all, initially, like the first 10 years of B1G1 development was pretty like a manual, face-to-face connection. We go to events and speak at conferences and invite businesses to join us, or we had face-to-face meetings to talk to business people. So with that, our strong connections already existed in Australia or UK, so that's how like initially we spread. And also because this initiative is spread through word of mouth and referral. So when we already have members in those marketplace, then naturally we will have more members joining, more businesses joining in those countries. So that's one. Another part is because as a global initiative, but initially with basically still limited resources and capacity, right? So we had to focus on something. And so we focused on English speaking market only, meaning the website. So until now, or system, B1G1 system until now has been only in English. So we don't have a regional language just yet. Well, it will be coming in the future, but we focused on that. And so that covered those English speaking countries. Asia, like I think more and more people like percentage of population it does understand English, but I think naturally speaking, those Western countries like you mentioned, like European countries or Oceania, or there is already existing awareness for global giving, global support, global aid. So businesses or individuals in those countries already actively give a lot globally.
Right.
But in Asia, there is still more, I think, local focus than global focus. And I'm sure those things will start to change because, we are in this globalized world right now, and we actually know and then start to see more and more about what's happening in other countries, and people are starting to care more about what's happening around the world too. So with that awareness shift, I'm sure we will gradually start to shift and can expand much better in different parts of the world as well. But historically, this is the explanation for why we have so many members in those countries.
That makes total sense. And I mean, I want to quickly touch on the numbers because you mentioned the 3,000 companies, but you're up at like if your website's up to date, 291 million or even more giving impacts. So these micro impacts, these are cumulative, of course, and 14 million days of education, 327,000 trees planted, 8 million meals given, 2.2 million days of healthcare, access to healthcare given. The numbers are pretty phenomenal considering, it's 3,000 companies. If you scale 10x your the number of companies who are baking in these micro giving moments, then I mean, it's an extremely incredible story that on what you've executed. I'd love to get a little bit into, because I mean, Steve Jobs, I think, is someone who was obsessed with simplifying things, and I'm pretty sure he said, like, simple can be harder than complex, right? You have to work hard at making something simple. So I'd really love to get into how this works, because it sounds easy. Someone buys a coffee and then someone else gets access to clean water. But how did you get going in the early days in terms of measuring these actions and finding partners and things, and then and how has it evolved so that you can scale this up? Because it seems to me a lot of things to track, and a lot of ways where growing can also create impacts for your partner, like too much demand almost over a specific thing. Can they deploy it? So
in B1G1, we have two groups of most, very important partners. So one side is the businesses that we work with, and then, come to implement effective giving in their regular work. And the other side is the social impact organizations, charity organizations that we select, assess, and bring them on board to help them list their project activities. And we, regularly serve these two groups to make this whole thing work, right? So this is an ecosystem really to enable micro impacts to have, the maximum capacity and maximum impact collectively together. So what we had to figure out to make this happen is, first of all, we had to make sure that we had the right criteria to select the right charity organizations. And then also in order to achieve this impact-based giving model, we had to work with organizations that have a track record and history, and then financial statistics around their project activities, right? And then also to look at what they are doing and find the opportunity to break down their core activities into a small micro unit, so that businesses can say, well, I can choose this project and link it to my business activity. So just as an example, so if you look at organization that is specialized in bringing access to water to communities, such as by building wells. And building one well might cost, let's say, $5,000-$6,000 US. And that amount of money is a lot for a small business to support.
Absolutely.
So what we do is we apply this methodology of either to find the one unit of impact, like one tree or one brick or one meal, or we will actually break down access to resources into daily units, such as if this well lasts for 10 years, right? Like without too much maintenance. And they have the statistics because they are experienced organization. And they also have a statistics about the number of people in the average community. And then we take those numbers and distill it and then come up with impact unit. So to bring access to water to one person for one day with this project is 1 cent, actually less than 1 cent, but 1 cent. So then when we go to the business side, we look at, or we ask businesses to think about certain actions that happen in their company, such as, actually, every day we have so many phone calls, every day we send so many emails, or every day we actually have lots of meetings. So then we take those regular actions and then we help those businesses to create this thing called giving stories on the B1G1 portal. Then when they create the giving stories and create the project and then business action match on their account, then they can choose whether it's better for them to just come back to B1G1 platform and then key in the actions that happened and then submit and just simply give. And it's almost like a shopping experience, couple of clicks and then giving is done. And then their impact counter gets updated. So that's one way. But another way, now we didn't have earlier days, but we today have API integration. So businesses can actually connect the giving story with more than like 4,000 apps because we do Zapier integration as well as direct API integration. So businesses can automatically track every time people sign up for our event, through Eventbrite system or Zoom, Zoom webinar registration, then that impact can be automatically pushed to their giving card. And, they can also do things like every month we want to do carbon offset for the team members we have in a company. So then they can set up a carbon offset giving and turn it into an auto monthly giving. Whatever that is, we find opportunities to turn business actions into habitual giving. And then as a result, businesses will be creating great impact, and then their impacts are counted, in the impact counter, which they can embed on their website and then say okay, we created this many impacts, and this is actually an actual impact that they funded already, through their giving. So they're not just saying it that we will do something, but they can say, this is what we have done. And that becomes a meaningful way for the business to share the progress they are making with their team members or even customers, and then use that as a moment to express gratitude.
It's you're basically an accountability partner as well. I don't know if you are familiar with Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear. It's tiny changes lead to remarkable results. That's kind of what B1G1's all about. And having that accountability, they say if you want to kind of create a powerful habit, having an accountability partner is one of the best ways, because, for example, I'm not inclined to take myself to the gym very often, unfortunately. But if you've got a trainer or somebody or even a friend who you're meeting in the gym, then you're going to be there because you've got that accountability. And I think, the other learning from that book is the big kind of effects of small changes over, small changes compound over time. And that's what you're allowing these businesses to do. 1% better per day for a year is actually 30 times better over that course of the year. So you really are taking companies where giving is potentially an afterthought or kind of at the end of a fiscal year, something that they do, and you're allowing them to make it part of their business model, which I think must be an attractive reason for certain types of consumers to also be choosing them as a partner. So you're actually making them more attractive as a business, but also providing the authority and the kind of legitimacy around these impact moments. So it's an important role that you're kind of facilitating. I find this fascinating. How has the downturn and COVID and things like that impacted these giving moments, though? Has that been? It must have been super hard because so many companies have obviously had their bottom line impacted, and is giving a bit like marketing kind of the first thing that has to go off the budget, or did you manage to ride that storm?
Yes, you are absolutely right about the pandemic too. So I mentioned to you that in the early days of B1G1, it was more service-oriented company. And then in the last 5 years or so, we started to gradually shift to digital focus. And then so that shift to subscription format started before the pandemic. But we were still still, having quite a lot of physical meetings and events and travels to bring, more business members on board. So of course, when pandemic hit, we did get affected quite big time. And then so many of our businesses being, majority SMEs were affected by the pandemic, and some industries got hit really, really badly. Some businesses actually shut down. Some businesses actually contacted us and said, so sorry, but we can't continue our giving right now, the subscription right now. So we had a huge hit in our bottom line as well as giving figure. But interestingly, because that was 2020. So 2020 March, April, May was those 3 months were the worst month for us. But what happened was from Q3 and Q4 of 2020, actually giving started to come back. Membership was still tricky, but giving started to grow. And then we thought, wow, like giving is recovering. And we were quite amazed by that because it was still, we were still deep in the pandemic, right? But what we realized was that because we work with the ecosystem of so many different kinds of businesses, there were many businesses in there that were doing better during pandemic or who pivoted very quickly and then started to recover very fast. So as a whole, as the kind of community business network, the overall giving figure started to recover already from like late 2020. And then what happened was in 2021, even though, we didn't have such like a huge membership growth, like a huge spike or anything, but the overall giving grew almost by 80% in 2021 compared to 2020. Wow. And so we had the record giving year last year. Wow. And this year, it's still like we are on track to hit the record year again. So I think the most important thing for us as we work on this initiative, even though so many people asked us, like, why do you focus on SMEs? Why don't you just go to large corporations and then ask them to donate or give or pay you consulting fee or, because that will give us biggest income as well as biggest giving. But we never did that as the primary focus because we believe that the real sustainable change happens through change of ecosystem or creation of ecosystem rather than one big thing. And if we were dependent on a couple of large companies, for our revenue as well as for our giving, if one thing happened and then those companies said, sorry, we can't do this anymore, then everything is gone.
Completely. That's a super important lesson because, actually this is the good side of the problem that you were setting out earlier when you were like, it would have been easier if we just picked one market and one kind of product offering. But if you'd have chosen, I don't know, restaurants or cafes or something, you would have possibly wiped out the business. Whereas that diversity of different industries, the diversity of having, you always want, as an investor, I know when I look at companies, I always want to look at how diversified their revenue is. Is it coming from one kind of big corporate partner, as you say, who could, flick of a switch, suddenly be gone? And that is a major risk for fledgling businesses. So the fact that you've got a nicely diversified group of companies has allowed you to kind of weather the storm. And I'm really encouraged to hear that giving is increasing. Maybe the pandemic also made us think about, how connected the world is and how much need there is to support a lot of these good causes. Potentially, I don't know. But tell us more about that transition. You mentioned looking or exploring subscriptions, which sounds different to the kind of if this then that kind of model that you've had. How are you able to do that? How can you transition to a subscription model? What's the plan there?
So when we say subscription, and then we are talking about our social enterprise subscription income. So what happened? So just to clarify the model, when businesses join us and create a B1G1 account and access all of the member benefits such as access to the platform, access to the impact counter reporting, events, opportunity to join the study tours, like all that kind of things, right? Then they will actually pay for subscription, just as a membership organization kind of fee. Then when they give through the portal, then actually our portal is like a pass-through almost. Wow. So what happened is when you give $100 or $10 or $1 through the B1G1 portal, then fully 100% of that amount will go to the project. And we actually currently even top up the bank charges and the credit card payment fees as well.
Okay.
So basically, we exist to ensure business giving effective, but not only effective, but meaningful and impactful and connecting and then good for the business culture and purpose and mission. So we are a business service organization and value-based organization. So when I say subscription, I'm talking about this like subscription income because we made it into subscription model so that it's easy for businesses to actually sign up and create an account right away, rather than we will consult with you and then you have to pay thousands of dollars to set up B1G1 or something. So that's why the shift to that initially was difficult because our income, suddenly dropped when we switched the model. And then, but we knew that the subscription is the way to actually create the sustainability for the entire initiative. And that was true because subscription wise, like it actually went, dropped in pandemic, but started to build back up. So that's how like we reached the break even as an initiative like last year. And then we are looking at growing this initiative even more from here. Then when in terms of giving, like that when this happens, then this happens. So that model is still the same. There is a subscription type of component because we want our members to create giving habit. So they're paying for the giving and then actually like making the impacts happen. We ideally want every business to be able to do that every month, right? Like, but checkout of payment, like because with the API, they can be tracking all the impact and pushing to the giving card all the time. So the paying for the impact, sometimes it may not necessarily be always monthly subscription format, but as much as possible, we recommend businesses to give on a monthly basis still.
That makes a really nice proposition in a way, because I think there's so many ways that giving ends up being small chunks taken by middlemen along the way, right? So 100% of the actions are being delivered. 100% of the money is going directly to those partners. The subscription allows you to have predictability of revenue, I guess, to manage the business and to do all of those things, because at the end of the day, there is no giving without you guys and the team and the ability to continue to develop the technology and the company. Where is this going? Like, what is there any? I know it's probably a loaded question in that the whole purpose of B1G1 is not really to set hugely ambitious goals. It's to kind of give in the moment, and those goals will kind of look after themselves. But do you have anything? It's 15 years since you started. Do you have anything you're trying to get to this year that's a special goal?
So yes, this is the first time ever. Like we really thought about the scaling seriously, and so we are starting to talk with potential funders, grant makers and investors and the more significant partners to work together to take this initiative to the next level. Because even though we have 3,000 or so businesses, those businesses are SME, mostly SMEs. So it's not like people around the world already know of B1G1 and B1G1 messaging. Right? Like, so we go on the street and ask passerby, like, oh, do you know B1G1? Then probably most cases people say, what's B1G1? So we are going to make B1G1 the household brand for social impact, effective giving for businesses. So every business has the opportunity to think about what they can do, rather than thinking like there's nothing they could do, they're too small and so on. I really recognize the importance of all of the things we did along the way to develop this initiative to where it is. But then the future 5, 10 years and 15 years, we need to move much faster and do more, because the world needs that. Today there are so many issues and big issues, whether it's environmental issues or conflicts or income inequality around the world, and those are the big things. And we can't expect the government or few wealthy people to fix these things for us. And I really believe that the businesses around the world have the power to actually solve these things together. When we come together, we can do it. So with that in mind, with the next 5 years, we are aiming to reach 1.2 billion giving impacts by 2026. Wow. And then, yes, and then with that trajectory, in the next 10 years, we will be doing billions and billions of impacts around the world. So it's an extraordinary time.
I'm just inspired, and I'm thankful that you're sharing this story with us. I mean, now you're definitely going to be on the radar because you're on the Causeartist podcast, and that goes out to a lot of people. So I'm sure that there'll be tons of members joining or hoping to join soon. If not, I'll be nudging all of my contacts because you take all the heavy lifting out of giving. So for companies, I think every founder builds a company or a business, hoping to create great outcomes, hoping to create employment, hoping to create prosperity for families, hoping to make a difference, a dent in the world. And I think the work you're doing is turning ordinary businesses into giving machines that can then use those credentials to share with their customers and partners, and I'm sure it will spread virally almost. But absolutely, if you're listening and you like the sound of what Masami's doing and you're a partner, potential partner or potential funder, absolutely get in touch. I just want to say thank you so much for coming up with such a incredibly powerful and brilliantly executed company, and I'm really looking forward to tracking your progress on to crossing the billion giving moments in 2026. Happy 15th year anniversary, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.